today's session of protecting your online holiday season revenues. We are running the second of the series of security-based webinars from Haylix, and today we are joined by our partner Ingram Micro. Today's session, what we will be covering is a very brief company overview and presenters intros. Also, we'll go through and hand it over to Luke, who'll be defining the threat to your online business and talk about strategies to protect your online sales events. And then finally, we'll hand over to Rod from Ingram Micro, who will talk about the retail security journey. And then if you're still with us by the end, there will be a short competition with prizes, and that will be run by Jess from Ingram Micro. Those prizes, first prize will be a $200 holiday basket, second prize a $100, and third prize a $50 holiday hamper basket. So stick around for that. It'll be a bit of fun in the Cahoots competition. So I'm the Senior Pre-Sales Lead here at Haylix, and I've been here for almost 2 years, running the pre-sales department and product enablement part of Haylix. Joining us today is Luke Alasia, who's our Principal Engineer. Luke's been with Haylix since 2020, and he's our Principal Engineer in charge of Cloud DevOps and Security Specialists. Also, we are very lucky here to have Rod Lazarus from Ingram Micro. Rod is the head of cybersecurity at Ingram Micro, based in Sydney, and he's certainly got substantial background in cybersecurity of 25 years of experience, and we're extremely proud and pleased to have him with us today. Today's session, protecting your online holiday season sales revenue, is targeted towards the middle-level management. It ventures into some technical components, but it's sort of targeted towards that mid-level sort of information. We've also got another session that will be running early next year around the March timeframe, which will be around an effective WAF, enemy at the gate. So just very briefly, just to touch on Haylix. Haylix is it's been around for decades, and it's a full spectrum IT management service provider. And we've got an experienced local team of technical professionals that can deliver a whole range of both base security and protection services for your public cloud environments. Ingram Micro, our proud partner that's going to be joining us today and presenting, they have local sales team of representatives in 61 countries around the world. They provide a lot of support from enablement, technical services, distribution for Haylix and many other businesses around the world. And at this point in time, I'll hand over to Luke, who will be taking us further into the session.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks for that introduction, Darren. So I'm Luke. I've been at Haylix for about 3 years as principal engineer. I do cloud architecture and infrastructure for our key clients, mainly as an Azure subject matter expert. And what I will do today is take you through the online retail cyber threat landscape, give you a feel for the lay of the land that you need to grasp to secure your online retail business. And after that, Rod is going to take you through the actual journey to getting there. So the agenda for me today, like I said, I'll give some numbers to the threat landscape, and then we'll talk about specific threats and how to protect from them. So that's general high traffic load, DDoS and scraping, exposed endpoints and APIs, payment abuse, and data breach. Now, to get into the numbers, Since the start of the COVID pandemic, with working from home and lots of challenges in IT and cybersecurity, cybercrime is up 600%. In 95% of these cyber breaches, the ultimate cause is human error, or in other words, something wasn't secured that should have been secured. As we've seen in the news recently, this is happening all over the place in Australia and abroad, and breaches are impacting all sectors, government, retail, healthcare. I'm sure the news are still in the back of your head. Now, first up, let's have a look at how I've structured my slides here, just to make this structurally clear to everybody. I've got the threats at the top. In the middle, I've got the risk and the impact, and then at the bottom in green is your solutions, protections, mitigations that I want you to look into. So the first one is not really strictly a cyber threat or a security risk. It is what we're kind of all hoping for, right? So during the holiday season, we all expect and we all hope for the traffic on our online retail sites to go up. We want to have increased checkout volume. And of course, this causes increased infrastructure load. So at the base, this is a good problem to have. There are lots of much worse problems to have that I'll go into. But at the same time, just like a malicious attack, this increased traffic can impact the performance of your site, can take your site down. And if your users, your customers can't get through your site, the site takes too long to load, they're going to move somewhere else. So the things that you have to put in place or have in place for this is the scaling strategy. The scaling strategy goes hand in hand with monitoring, because you can't always predict what your scale is going to be, what the impacts on your site performance are going to be. So you need to be monitoring the performance and the resource consumption on your site, on your front end, on your back end, and you need to have a scaling strategy, auto scaling, scheduled scaling, and all of that can only work if you have a site architecture that works with scaling. And if you can scale out your front end but not your database, then that's one of the things where you're potentially going to get into trouble, because there's always a bottleneck, and you need to be able to account for all of your bottlenecks. One of the things that became popular with COVID, with COVID lockdowns, just because you were in a place where you couldn't predict whether tomorrow you're going to have twice or 5 times or 10 times the normal load, is waiting room services, where you just put your customers into a queue and to smooth out the load on your site. Like I said, a last-ditch effort. It's not a great customer experience, but it keeps your site up and it lets customers use your site, even if some of them are going to have to wait for a bit. Next up, DDoS and scraping. That's the high traffic that you don't want. So DDoS ransom attacks, vulnerability probing, high volume scraping, all of those things are illegitimate traffic in most cases, even if scraping is potentially something where review sites, cost comparison sites is something that you want to give access to your data. But if it's not controlled, there is a huge risk of overloading and crashing your site. And again, your customers can't give you business if your site's not up. So you need the most cost-effective way to improve this is to identify and remediate your expensive transactions. A lot of sites have a very slow search function. Some sites have slow category pages where the whole site, the whole data has to be rendered out for every time a user uses your search, clicks the next link on your search page, and so on. If you go to your developer teams, your product owners, and ask them to have comprehensive performance monitoring and remediate those transactions. This is going to pay dividends in lots of ways. Your site performance is going to get better. Your site is going to be more robust. Your customers are going to have a better experience on your site. Then for the more malicious, traffic, rate limiting and DDoS protection is where you need to have a DDoS service that protects you there. And in between the two, there is caching. So a cached page is one that doesn't have to be rendered by your backend. And that gives you on both sides, both protection from malicious traffic and your user experience. This gives you an improvement. This helps you in both those areas. Now, the next big thing, that is something that, again, I think is probably still in the back of all of our mind: exposed endpoints and APIs. Unsecured APIs first up. If an API is put up for internal use only, and then the other department misunderstands something and hooks that API up to the public internet, you're looking at a data breach. So you're exposed, any exposed backend endpoints, any unsecured third-party integrations that allow to bypass the protection that you have on your front end is a huge breach risk. And the only way to mitigate that, to resolve that, is to have a comprehensive security stance, and you can only get there through security audits and penetration testing, so that you can put your whole infrastructure and all of your third-party integrations on a secure foundation. Now, we're going to have a few more numbers. The average cost of a single social engineering attack to a company, the damage that does, is 130,000 Australian dollars. And on average, it takes 287 days to identify and contain that breach. So that's almost a year before you even know that you've been breached. Obviously a huge risk. And just one other scary number, just for people aged 65 and over, it's estimated that your customers are suffering damage loss of $2.3 million a year from scams that are targeting them, and that potentially your data, if it leaks, if it's breached, is contributing to that. So one of the things there is payment abuse. So abuse and verification of stolen credit card details and breached customer accounts, breached customer data in general, huge commercial and reputational risk. And that is where you need to get in payment monitoring, and you need to secure your customer accounts. On payment monitoring, this is something that you can talk to your payment provider, or you can talk to third-party vendors that can secure and evaluate your whole checkout flow and give a risk score to your payment. And every single payment, if it's suspicious, can be stopped, can be reviewed before it is completed. And that takes a huge amount of risk out of payments. The other thing that where really a perspective shift is required in how we treat our customers is that we need to take on, as online retailers, as the IT and cyber providers supporting them, we need to take on the responsibility of securing customer accounts. Blaming customers for having insecure passwords, blaming customers for leaking their credentials doesn't really fly in 2022. There are technical measures available now to detect breached credentials, to protect your customer logins via things like multi-factor authentication. And there are lots of simple technical mitigations that can just secure your customer accounts better and take out risk, reduce the risk of customer data and customer account breaches. Let me take a quick sip here. One of the last things here, just looking at everything from more of a data perspective, everything that we've talked about so far can ultimately result in or have as one component a data breach, but data is also something that you really need to look at from a holistic strategy standpoint. Your specific data assets, your data storages, your databases, those can be unsecured, and it's very easy for something like that to hide. What we do as a service for our customers is that we monitor all of their exposed endpoints based on open source, publicly available data. And so things that we don't even explicitly manage, things that are managed by other teams, potentially managed by third-party providers, those can have obviously vulnerabilities, those can be poorly managed, and we have the capability to look at that and let the customer know, and sorry, let the company know, and help them find the right teams, the right third-party provider to talk to for those unsecured components. Social media and open source intelligence data sources are also where, when your data leaks, it shows up, where potentially your customers are potentially losing their data, and that is also something that you have to account for in your data security strategy. So to mitigate, to reduce the risks of those data breaches, you need to control your data storage. You need to have a comprehensive strategy of what data you collect, where you store it, what you do with it, who gets access to it, and ideally a data loss prevention system and a SOC SIEM that is a security operations center with a security information management system, so that all of the data movement, all of the traffic inside of your infrastructure is monitored, and if there is an issue, you can immediately react. One of the things that also has to happen here again is a perspective shift in how you treat your data, with data science being a fully established thing in your business now. Probably there might be an attitude of collect all data, store all data, collect more data so that we can do data science on it. But you also have to consider that all the data you collect can be a toxic asset. Data that you're not collecting, data that you're not storing, data that you have strong policies and processes in place to delete it once it's no longer needed, is data that can't get breached because it's not there. So those are the specific points about the threat landscape, and I'll just do a quick recap of the mitigation measures that you need. So load monitoring and scalability to manage high and variable traffic load, DDoS protection, rate limiting to reject illegitimate traffic, web application firewall protection and perimeter security to prevent breaches, payment monitoring and customer account security, and a comprehensive data security strategy. And based on that recap, there is a call to action here. You can come to us, you can come to Ingram Micro, you can and should, of course, talk to your internal teams about where the gaps are in your cybersecurity strategy. So one of the first things that you need, if you don't already have it, if you do have it, make sure that it's managed as a first-class citizen of your business, of your cyber strategy, a comprehensive web application security provider with DDoS protection, WAF protection, and a CDN. That is something where in the past you had to choose between whether you're getting a CDN provider or a WAF provider. You had limited bandwidth. You had to hook things up in series. That is no longer the case. You can now have a comprehensive web application security provider that does all those things and does them well. Next up, security controls review and penetration testing. Again, that is something you should already have in place. That is something where you need to make sure that everywhere where you have cyber risks, you have controls that are reviewed and tested. Next up, payment security review. If you have gaps there, find out what is your payment provider, how are your payment gateways configured. Next up, a managed SOC SIEM. Lots of retail companies do not have the capability to train staff and manage their own security operations center. That is something where there are now managed solutions that are good, that produce high value intelligence, high value events, use AI to classify all of the information and surface. They collect all of the security data and they surface the high value, high criticality alerts and signals for triage and for you to look into them and remediate. And the last thing, just a data storage review. Your organization probably has a data management policy, and you should be looking at how your processes are aligned with that, what you actually do, what your third parties do, and don't just rest on contracts or assumptions about what people are doing and whether they're storing things securely, but you have to review this and find all of the data carrying assets in your infrastructure and actually review what is going on with them. Now, from that, I hope I've given you a bit of an overview. I hope I haven't scared you too much. All of this is manageable, and Rod is now going to talk about that. So the actual journey of implementing security in an online retail environment. Over to you, Rod.
Thanks very much, Luke. Hi, everybody. As I said, Rod Lazarus. This is a slide I normally put up. One, it's amusing because it says, the conversation of electronic data into a form that can be only understood by those authorized to do so, or those who can crack the code. And it's kind of about what security is today. All of the processes and people and technology, all of the vendors, all the things we put together today to protect our environments still has the ability to be hacked, has the ability to be penetrated by those who do possess that skill to do it. And when I look at, I started 25 plus years ago. It's very nice of Darren to say 25, I'm a bit older than that, but it was nice to say I started out in retail. And when my slides are not picking for some reason, hang on a sec. Oh, there we go. Now it's decided to do two. When I started out in retail, this was what I actually configured. I started out for Woolworths, as you can see. And when we did, we had a firewall at the front. We had defense in depth. So we had one DMZ. We had some servers in that DMZ because there was a small kind of web front end that we had. We had the office network, the store network, which was an amazingly large flat network, and the warehouse. So it was reasonably simple to configure. There wasn't that much. We had VPNs, dedicated lines. It was reasonably easy to protect. Today, our companies tend to look like that. And that's not even a really complicated one. And when you look at all of those moving parts and what we have to secure today, there's the amount of knowledge that our engineers are expected to have is increased 100-fold. There is so many moving parts in security today that it makes it almost impossible for one person to actually do it. And to make it all work, you need back-end systems, you need data centers, you need this, and you need an enormous amount of piping in the back end to get that work. And for those of you who've been there, yes, there are retails that do look like that. So I have worked in data centers that cabling is like that. I've also worked in offices that look like that. And when especially with COVID, especially with a lot of other things that we had sort of going on, that there's security moves so fast today that we don't always have time to build the appropriate infrastructure we have behind it. And I know what that's like inside the retail network, because when I started securing different types of retail, it was literally like whack-a-mole. Every time I secured something else came up. And it was, I know when I talk to partners and when we talk to sort of their customers as well, quite often understanding their own network can become a bit of a problem. We've sat down on day one with these saying, okay, yep, we're going to secure your 25 sites. And they've come back and gone, oh, I thought we only had 23. Well, no, you've got 25, and here's how we found that. We're like, oh, okay. So when you take all of that together to what it's like, you've got to put stores, you've got offices, you've got warehouses, you've got the customer network. There's so many different moving parts in retail to actually to secure that network. It's amazingly complicated to do. And then you put on top of that, the amount of ways that people can purchase goods today. I know if I can, when I'm driving home, I can literally get on my phone, place an order, drive to the store, send an SMS that I'm sitting down in the car park, and I'll come down and put it in the boot. I don't even have to go into a store nowadays. So the amount of infrastructure required, the cloud networks, the IoT, the POS networks, the FIS, everything else that you need to put in place that you need to protect is incredibly complex today to do that. And I know that one of these things is a single pane of glass, and I like it. It's a terminology that everybody used. It's well overused today, but at its core, the systems you've got in place today, so all of the servers and the PCs and the networks and everything else you've got in place, they love to talk. PCs love to talk, servers love to talk, routers, switches, firewalls, they all like to talk. They're all quite chatty and they all send logs. If you can correlate all of those logs somewhere, if you can put them all together, the more data you have that you can put into one place, the more chance you've got to identify anything that's going wrong or any sort of indicators of compromise that are going on in your networks today. That's where a SIEM and a SOC come in. But if you have a look at sort of the way you build it, I know it's complex. I know that there's SIEM and SOC is reasonably hard to sort of, if you're a smaller type vendor, you don't have sort of the need for a SIEM, then there's MDR, there's XDR, there's a lot of different sort of vendors and applications and partners that you can use to give you that level of access, to give you that level of telemetry, to understand what's going on in your network. Because humans are amazingly easy to read. Like I know when I come into work in the morning, I sit down, I turn on my PC, I wait for it to start up. I think, oh crap, I need a coffee. Off I go for a coffee, come back, sit down and start work. As far as what the engineers see on my workstation is I come in every morning, I pause, I go, it does open up Word, open up Outlook, open up things that I need to do and do that. If you've got a SIEM and a SOC, if you've got people understanding what network does, then that if my laptop starts doing something unusual, if it starts sending information somewhere, if it sees a different IP address, I know I'm in Ingram Micro at the moment, I was only here kind of 2 weeks and I was on the Wi-Fi network, it wasn't working. I plugged my LAN cable in at the same time. As I did it, I went, uh-oh. Within 30 seconds, I was locked out from the network because there was enough systems in place to say that's the same network, that's the same IP address on 2 separate networks inside our environment. And because we've got that telemetry, it locked out my laptop very, very quickly. I also spent the next hour with the tech guys getting it myself unlocked and back into the system. But that's where I know a single pane of glass is something to look at, but at the end of the day, if you've got that, if you can see that telemetry in your systems, then you have the ability to actually identify any risks that appear in your environment. And it all comes back to security by design. And that's another term that we use a lot in here. Security by design is more about talking to people, literally getting the right person in the right room. It's about having someone who understands the security of your business, not the engineer, not the tech down there, because if you get him in a room when you're talking about building applications, when they get anything off the ground. But you need someone in there to say, yep, I understand security, I understand retail, I understand my business, and then I can go and talk to the tech in the back room and go, okay, this is what I want and this is what I need you to do to actually secure the business, and and put in place the security measures that you've got to implement those new applications. I like frameworks. I think that there's a lot of smart people that spend a lot of time putting them together. And the frameworks I've got listed here, it depends where you are on that security journey. If you are just starting out on this security journey, then the Essential 8 is probably a good start. CIS is a good start. That is where they give you the basics, the very, the minimum you need to start protecting your network. I quite like the NIST framework for myself. It's quite clear, concise, and it takes into account the fact that with sort of threats that we deal with every day, it's not so much if, it's when they get in. So today we build our security infrastructure to look at all the aspects and try to protect it, but you also need a playbook for what to do to when they get in. What happens when someone gets into your network? Who do I call? You can call Darren and myself, that's fine, but you probably really want a playbook in there, and you need to understand who fronts the media. Who do I call? The person who represents your company may not be the CEO or the CISO. It could be Bob from accounting. Like, he may be very good in front of the camera, and you need, when you find yourself in that position, then it's also you need to make sure that you have that media spin is very short. You want to make sure that your time in front of the camera is very, very short. You want to tell the same story to everybody and get yourself out very, very quickly around that. But when I look at the top threats for retail, they're not that different from around what a lot of the other verticals are. Ransomware is still proliferate. There's around sort of ransomware and phishing attacks. They are pretty much the top of everybody's mind. If you have a look at the way the last breaches, it did start out with phishing attacks. That's how they did get in. And with our move to cloud, the cloud vulnerabilities are getting more and more. Cloud is a great idea, and I think it saves you on tin, it saves a lot of things. But you really need someone to understand when you move something to cloud, how that all fits together. What that looks like, what a multi-cloud environment looks like. When you talk about, because you'll get the playbook from AWS and Google Cloud and all the rest of the guys that you speak to, and they talk about security. When they talk about security, they talk about securing their own network. So if you can imagine a cloud environment is like building a house. The concrete slab and everything below it, all the plumbing, all the electricity, that's your AWS and your Google Cloud. Everything you put on top of that is your responsibility, and it's your job to protect it. And that's, I know I talked about, securing your cloud and your WAF firewalls and everything else that you need to do. You will need to spend a lot of time, if you start moving stuff into the cloud, is building out a security network that you can protect that information out there. Patch management should be the easiest thing to do. I know because I work with a lot of penetration testers, and we deal with a lot of hacks. I worked for FireEye and Mandiant for a while there as well, and seeing how they get in a lot of systems and a lot of breaches happen around patches. They unpatch systems. For a hacker, an unpatched system is a gift. If you don't have the right security controls on a system, it's not up to date, it's very, very easy to kind of crack that. And along with that, there's the configuration errors. Take the time to configure the systems, get people to double check it. There's so many times you've seen, look at the latest, the Optus one that they had. That was just a straight configuration error. That's all it was. And now I think I was reading the other day that it's costing them so many millions of dollars just to replace people's passports. That's not even the breach. It's just on replacing people's passports over a simple configuration error. And that's where that security by design comes in. And get the right people in the right room, have those conversations, make sure that you have security at the beginning of a project, not at the end. When I look at the store network, and I've done a lot of security reviews over the years, your staff are your frontline. They're the ones who are out there. They're the ones facing the customers. They're the ones in the back office. They're the ones doing the ordering. They're the ones who are doing logistics and everything else. They can be your greatest strength, and they should be. But they can also be your greatest weakness. You know, if you get somebody gets an email and goes, "You have $100,000, click here." Yeah, maybe some education might go around and say, let's not click on those type of emails. Take the time to spend with your staff and train your staff, because that's what out of all of the breaches I've seen in retail, that's where they start. You know, there's generally weaknesses in staff. There's a lot of systems that they can access. You know, they have a lot more access than they probably need access to. And your systems as well. Careful where you put those PCs in your store. You know, I did a security audit a couple of years back where I walked into a store with a CFO. I went, "Oh, that's a PC you've got there. That can be accessed by pretty much anybody." And they went, yeah, but it's secure. So I walked over to it, had a look, picked up the keyboard, turned it over. On the bottom of the keyboard was a Post-it note with the admin password and admin on it. And they sort of went, you imagine how that conversation went. Okay, so I've just now got admin access to your ordering systems. Take the time to secure those systems in your shop. Yeah, and if you're going to leave them out there, I say a USB port for somebody who wants to get in and get information. I've got some USBs floating around from the pen tester that I know that I can walk past a PC, literally a couple of seconds, drop it in the side of that or wherever that USB port is in that laptop or in that workstation and keep walking. About a couple of seconds to do it. Within that, the information I've got and the programs I've got on that USB will give me everything I need to know. Not only is it a keylogger, it'll actually go back and try and send all the information around that PC back out to where I want it to go. And it's funny because when people see a USB stick inside a PC, they'll leave it. Or worse, they'll click on it and see what's in it. They don't generally take it out. And then I can walk back later, day later, and pick it back up again. I'll have all the information I need. And one of the other things is with your HR, with your staff, because retail have got a reasonably high transient rate. And there's a lot of people that come and go in retail. When they leave, make sure you lock out their access. You know, it's amazing what happens when you don't. If you ever look at, I think one of the biggest ones was Cisco a couple of years back, where they had somebody, ex-member, they let go, obviously was disgruntled, came back in and deleted over 200 of their virtual servers. It didn't do any immense damage because they were able to sort of retrieve it from backup, but it cost them millions, all because they didn't actually lock out this guy's access. I mean, he's now doing, a reasonable amount of time in jail for it, but at the end of the day, you still want to make sure that you do actually do that. Make sure you take care of the staff you've got and lock out when they leave. Make sure you terminate their systems. And add insult to injury, the systems we use to actually protect ourselves need to be actually set up correctly as well. So my son's a penetration tester and he loves to hack. And I said to him a while back, I said, no, we're fairly safe. It's, we got two-factor authentication. He went, okay, all right, challenge accepted. It took him 30 minutes to pop two-factor authentication. And here's how he did it. And mind you, this was one of the labs that he does. He went in, he used a dictionary attack against a website. And this is a website using two-factor authentication. He got the user ID and password. Mind you, he has a 2 terabyte text file. Just a text file. You can imagine how big 2 terabytes of text is. With just about every known password and every general password in it. So when he goes against that, he fires that against that. So it doesn't normally take him an enormous amount of time with these other techniques he's got to get the user ID and password. He went in there and located that backup section, logged onto it, generated the two-factor authentication. And in the backup section, he kept a copy of the code. So he scanned it, got his PIN and logged in. It took him 30 minutes. So even the systems we put in place today to protect ourselves need to be configured correctly. And like I said when I started, there is so many moving parts to security. There's no possible way that any one person, even a team of people, can do. So that's why with the guys like with ourselves, with the guys at Haylix, reach out to them, talk to them, start having those conversations early in the piece. If you're not sure what you don't know, then ask. I think the worst thing we can do is do nothing. I think we need to reach out. And if you don't know what you don't know, call the guys at Haylix, ask them those questions, get them involved early on to help you secure your networks. I think that's about it from me. Over to you, Darren.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Rod. That was, I think, really relevant and specific to retail. And from my point of view, I think your experience with Woolworths and retail and what you brought to bear is definitely relevant, given the fact that we've got the holiday season coming up soon. So I think, as you can sort of tell, you need to sort of be proactive as far as what you have in place, proactive with regards to what systems you have in place, your process, your procedures, and to ensure that you've got the appropriate visibility of the data movement and activity environment. So yeah, thank you very much, Rod, and thank you very much, Luke from Haylix. Appreciate your input on that. So just to close out, if you're interested in any demonstrations or discussions, please contact myself. My email's on the page there. Also, Ingram and Haylix have a webinar special where we're offering a free penetration test. So effectively, if you purchase a penetration test from us, we'll offer a second follow-up penetration test within 6 months. This is something that I think is specifically relevant to the upcoming sales season to ensure that you've got confidence that your environments are secure and the appropriate processes and policies are in place. So this is probably one of the quickest and easiest ways to sort of ascertain the security of your online environment. The next webinar we've got scheduled for March, which is around effective WAF and mitigate. And with that, I would thank you very much for attending today's session.